Hello, hi everyone. Welcome today to improve remote working for users and Ditch Content Sprawl with Microsoft Teams in 10 days. My name is Yatindra, and I'm joined by Chris from Combined Knowledge. So let me get started. Just a couple of house rules before we do. We're going to be recording this session, so just to make you aware of that, and also that if there's any questions, feel free to type them in the chat and we'll answer them as is relevant in terms of if we're showing you some information or giving you kind of an overview, then we might just delay that a little bit, or towards the end where we do have dedicated time for the questions that we'll be taking through in this webinar. So without further ado, let me start by first of all introducing myself. So my name is Yatindra Ranpura. I've been working in the SharePoint space for more than 10 years in public and private sector in various different roles, be it as an admin, typically end user, but also helping out the organizations that I've worked with. I've taken part in conferences for both Microsoft and SharePoint community events, and I have a fair amount of industry qualifications that I've accumulated over the more than 10 years within there. So if you need to reach out to me, feel free to contact me on Twitter or on LinkedIn. And I will now pass you on to Chris.
Hi everyone, my name's Chris. I work for a company called Combined Knowledge, and at CK I'm the technical content and training lead manager, so I manage the training team from our side. I've got about sort of 9 years experience with working with Microsoft technologies for rollouts and learning and adoption based projects. And I've also got experience with working with Microsoft literature as well, so I've worked with some fantastic authors on the Microsoft step-by-step book series. You'll also sort of see me speaking at conferences and community events around the UK. And just sort of joining Yatindra on the session today, just to sort of guide you through quite a sort of bumpy roadmap that quite a lot of us have found ourselves in. I'm going to jump back into the session a little bit later. I'm going to be sort of listening to Yatindra as we go through the seminar, but I'm going to let him sort of take the reins right now, and I'll come back in a little bit later.
Brilliant. Thanks very much for the intro, Chris. Okay, so where are we, and what are we talking about? So what you see in front of you is an interesting question in terms of who has led the digital transformation for your company. And some people would definitely choose COVID-19 because the CEO and CTO they might have plans in place, but I think because of where we are and in the current situation we're in, there's been a lot of momentum in terms of getting remote workers enabled and remote work to happen. And so I think all of the kind of internal management that you have driving this transformation, I think COVID-19 has brought that right into the front and center of mind to make sure people can be enabled to do whatever they need to in a really good way, and to make sure that they are empowered around that. So I'm going to just go to the next one. So from an AvePoint perspective, we can almost relate to a lot of the changes that we're seeing here. So the image that you see on the left could be, in January, maybe earlier this year, where you had a lot of people doing a lot of different things. But now, as you can see, the roads are quite empty, but we're still continuing doing what we do. And in terms of the graphic you see on the right-hand side, before COVID-19, Halfpoint as a company, we had a lot of conversations, but there were typically kind of three main brackets that we could say we're having these conversations in. Either they haven't started a Teams rollout, they hadn't really thought of it at the time, or they had and they just piloted it. There were probably, I'd say, a third of them were already turned on. However, there was no kind of control or any governance around that. So they were seeing a lot of sprawl, a lot of usage, but also kind of everyone creating different teams. There wasn't really a kind of a purpose behind some of the things that was going on. And we, as AvePoint, offer many capabilities around that. So from your migration to backup to records management and governance, which is what we're going to be focused on for the majority of this webinar. means that we kind of need to understand where does Teams fit into the picture, how can we make the most value out of that offering that we have from Microsoft, and also make sure that it's the kind of right framework for the business processes to grow, and also then provide additional value and additional return for your organization. So going forwards, in terms of what does that look like right now, we're having more conversations around things like your chats and meetings. So people are turning Teams on, they're going in, adding contacts. We were speaking to one company where they were doing an acquisition during this time, and they wanted to turn Teams on, so 200 of their members and a couple of staff from the new organization could just get to one place where they can talk, they can exchange details, they can then kind of map out the blueprint of what it's going to look like once those two companies merge together, plus also share the kind of ethos behind how both of them work. So I think it's a great way to drive that open area where you can converse, but also once they've started going down that journey, then they can collaborate on files, share policies, and kind of make it more mature as a conversation builds. But we also see that there's third-party bots that they probably want to use to make sure they have the right things in place where they can connect to different areas. And Teams enables that in a really good way. The graphic that you see on the left, it shows you the spike in terms of the usage of Teams as it's grown over time. So in the last, I remember going to a Microsoft conference in October, November last year, where daily users were still at about 8 or 9 million a day. Now that's going very, very high. And daily active use is shooting up. And I think the kind of environment we're in now is evident of that, where we typically will converse to at least 7 to 10 people across, say, a widely distributed organization. And a lot of that work will be driven within Teams. So we make sure that we can get the right people, but also do the right things within the Teams platform. So going forwards, we then we've had done some research in terms of, okay, so that's the current environment we're in, but what's going to happen in the future, and what do managers and your kind of chief financial operations managers think that it's going to be like in the future? And so there was a poll done at the end of March where the thinking from their perspective was that majority of the work that we're doing currently is probably going to stay the same. So the shift kind of has taken place, and what we're seeing now is going to be almost the ways going forward. So there will be more work from home, potentially to give you that saving in terms of the having a property where people come in. All the other benefits that arise from there are typically what people are going to be thinking of, and they're going to be trying to make sure that it's a safe environment for people to work in, but also making sure that it's as efficient as it can be. In my work, I know that we will typically be going out to clients and meeting them on that basis, but it's transformed completely from, say, a month ago, where we would have probably booked meetings. We would have said, okay, we'll come for maybe half a day session, kind of understand where you are with Office 365, and then enable you even further. But nowadays, I think everything is remote, and going forwards, once things do relax, then there will be kind of a reduced number of meetings and conversations that will be in person. Okay, so we're going now next to kind of why govern teams, and these are kind of typical questions that we get asked and we talk about in terms of what's the need for it? Why do we need to even think about governing teams? So there's a number of elements here, and these are all around looking at how you're using Teams, but also from a regulatory or a compliance perspective, to make sure that you're doing things in the right way. Because people typically, they'll pick things up, start doing things. However, that then becomes the de facto way. And these are just certain things that we need to be aware of. and we need to understand. So the first one is around, is external sharing turned on? And me and Chris were working on this presentation, so we turned it on, and we are able to co-author to make sure that I can then pass this PowerPoint presentation on to Chris, and we can have a conversation about it. But the question is, do you yourself as a company understand where that's shared, what's shared, and how important is it to the organization? And if external sharing is turned on, then would you want to limit that for specific workloads and specific practices that you have? The second one is around chats and meetings. So is it just for a short term that you need this team or group or any object that you create within the Office 365 platform? And it's to make sure we understand the life cycle behind it. If there's specific routes, then again, I'll show you the solutions that we can provide to address that. And what it will avoid is what you see on the left-hand side. So here we can see that I've got certain naming conventions, but I wouldn't know what they mean, or at a glance, I would love to know what kind of content would be inside there. So we do have some prefixes with sensitive, but it's got people's names or it's got other design projects. So it doesn't really, at a glance, give me an understanding of that. And in my previous work, where I've been looking at after large environments, that's kind of the first thing we need to look at in terms of if there is, say, sensitive data, we're sharing that outside the organization. Is it supposed to be that way? The third point is around, are we supporting Teams live events? And Chris is going to touch upon this in terms of the training that he provides. But it's important to understand why these are created, what kind of things are they going to be driving within there, and again, is this for a short term where they turn it on, do it, and then delete it afterwards, or is it going to be an ongoing basis where you might be training your end users for specific areas of the Office 365 platform? Will these spaces contain confidential data? So this is a very interesting one, because here we're talking about making sure things are labeled properly. We assign the correct sensitivity around that. And do we know actually what confidential means in terms of the data we're sharing? So that's a very important one, especially in the world of GDPR now, where we might be asked to produce a lot of information, and that if that lies across many different teams, it's going to be quite complex to try and retrieve all that in a timely manner. The next one is around, what is the life cycle of this team? And this is around, if we've got initiatives, if we've got separate processes, we want to make sure that these are captured, but we don't do things that are not needed. For example, creating different project areas where you know after 2 or 3 months that that project is complete, but making sure that there's someone responsible behind that will then be able to say, yes, this is no longer needed, or no, keep it going. This is an ongoing project and it's going to run for another year. So I think what we're trying to drive here is getting that understanding of who's responsible. I remember when I would create a team, I'd almost want to know who the owner is, how long they need it for, plus also what kind of things they're going to be doing within there. And the last one is around how many spaces are created by users in different departments. And I think this gives us an understanding of how people are adopting Teams, but also how they're then leveraging the capabilities within there and what kind of things they're doing. So I think we offer a lot of things within the Team Surge package, which will give you additional overviews in terms of who's creating what, and how we can drive that kind of landscape reporting. So going forwards, what do we think is going to be part of a well-governed implementation? So there's things like repeatability, and here we mean that we have the same thing that we're offering everyone, not different people create different things their own way, and then that then becomes a big problem maybe in the future. The second one is around administrative efficiency. We want to make sure that we are keeping things as lean as possible or as complex as possible. I mean, if you're creating a sensitive area, where I alluded to a company that was part of an acquisition, initially that might be very restricted. So you might apply specific labeling, cataloging, but also making sure that they're compliant so they don't overshare. And that could affect a lot of different things, and reputation and all those kinds of things are things we need to be aware of, and making sure that people don't then obviously do things in the wrong way. So going forwards, how can we then align that to your governance model? Well, IT governance can span very broad. And what we're going to be talking about today fits into the workspace provisioning, ongoing management, as well as the lifecycle management. But what you need to also be aware of is inside all of those things, we need to think of retention, records management, classification, and data loss prevention to make sure that we're conforming to the rules that we set out. So how can governance help with this? So I've already mentioned external sharing. I think this is very important to make sure it's understood when it's turned on and what kind of impact that has. We can also talk about targeted naming conventions, where these can be focused on specific departments. So you could have an engineering one which has a different way of doing things as opposed to a sales or a logistics. And we can cater for all of those. Regular recertification means we identify the right people in the right spaces at the right time. So it's an ongoing basis, and so if you create a team, maybe every month you want to check who's a member within that team. Are they internal? Are they external? We also want to make sure it's classified properly based on sensitivity. So this could be where you've got confidential or you've got open. Inactivity thresholds are really important, and this is where we kind of get an understanding of what's being used. If it isn't being used, we can flag that up and making sure that it kind of then is addressed. And the last one is around global user self-service. So next I'm going to show you an example of a workflow, and then we're going to do it live in terms of what that typically looks like. But the global self-service is making sure that we only show the right elements for the users. So what do I mean by that? It means that if your role means that you only have access to, say, create internal teams, where you are not allowed to share within, outside the organization, then that's catered for. However, if you need that and you may be part of a team that's working with vendors and outside partnerships, then we can also enable that. So going forwards, what does that typically look like, and what are we talking about from a Teams governance quick start? Is that we can build unique templates that include both public and private types of teams. So public teams mean the whole organization can see things. Private means that it's locked down, only the users that are part of that, so your members and your owners have access to that. We've got ready-made policies behind that will allow you to maintain the life cycles, classifications, naming conventions, and even guest access. All of this is done through a questionnaire method, which makes it much easier for someone to pick up and run with. And the last part is around the landscape reporting to make sure that things you're able to see how many things you've got across your whole tenancy, and you also be able to see what's due for renewals and governance and those kind of things I'll show you. So what does it typically look like? So I'm going to explain it through a kind of a diagram first, and then we'll go into the live interface. So we have Bob. Now Bob could fill in a questionnaire. That would go through a request, and then Bob's manager would then approve that operational workspace, and we can automatically have things such as a renewal as well as a lease around that. So the lease means that it's a property of the organization, not the end user, and some companies really like that analogy because they kind of understand that they're using this space, but there's so many things that they can build within there. We could also have different outcomes depending on how you answer that questionnaire. So I'll show you an example of this, but if it was something routine that you're asking for over and over again, and there isn't much kind of risk associated with it, you could enable self-service. And what this would mean is once Bob fills in the questionnaire, he doesn't need that management approval. And it would automatically create the project workspace, possibly in this case have it internal, and then be able to renew or archive or delete at the end of that life cycle. Or you could have it as a third one where you do have approvals, there's an operational workspace, and that would then be automatically backed up perhaps within the platform and using the AvePoint Cloud Backup solutions. So in terms of an overview, this gives you kind of an idea of what we're going to be showing you. And the key things that I'll be taking you through are the questionnaire elements, and we'll produce a team at the end of it. So questionnaires will be kind of leading the user in the right way, and kind of driving them to pick the answers that are relevant for them. And typical questions are going to be around membership, classification, external sharing, and also figuring out if it's a public or a private team they want. But it won't be down to the end user to define if it's public or private. It'll be the questions and the kind of involvement we have within there that will do that. So let me just click on my browser, and I'm gonna then start by showing you what that typically looks like. Just give it a second to load. And so here you can see MyHub. So MyHub is the Teams app that AvePoint have developed, and behind here is the cloud governance framework. So you can think of cloud governance as the engine behind this, and MyHub is a way of surfacing all the things that are part of it. So we can do a number of things. We can chat, and within the Teams interface here, I've got different notifications. So these will include things like recertification. If I have existing teams, then we can incorporate those in. And we can also look at groups as well as SharePoint sites within here. So I'm going to click on Start a Request. And within here, we will have a number of tiles. Now, these tiles are the kind of services that we can build into here. And they will be either creating site collections, teams, groups, but also they can be from a security perspective where we might have any changes of membership. So this can align to your joiner mover leaver process. We can assign temporary permissions, but within here, I've created a number of them around the team search. So I'm going to pick a confidential project as an example, and this is going to prompt me for a number of questions. And within here, I'm going to put request summary. We're going to say webinar, and here, that is the request summary that will go to an approver. In this case, I'm going to be the requester and the approver. So we've already predefined this, that because I sit in engineering, that's going to be the department that you'll see. We can also either select an existing team or create one from scratch. So I have the ability to go through all the teams I have access to, and then I can probably pick one if that exists through there. But in this case, we're going to start scratch, and we're going to say that this is a webinar project that we need to do. So by default, we're going to say it's private, and we're also going to, in this case, not allow outside senders. And this is because we want to make sure that it's confidential. It could be an internal webinar that I'm doing, which is top secret, and we don't want to then expose that to the larger audience in the organization. So we hit next, and this will then have a number of things that are already present. So it knows that I am Yatindra, my manager in this case is Partha. We can add additional owners if we want to. But we can predefine all of these things. We can also add team members before we create the actual object. So we can go either manually or dynamically and then pick different rules. So this will look at your Azure Active Directory. And if you have, say, organization, and then maybe group assignment, and if I already have a group that's been set up, I could probably choose a team that I maybe created as an example. Where we're doing a select to teams migration, we can add, so whoever was member of that, I could then bring into here. Here we can see the policy that's going to be applied. And in this case, it's going to have a 10 gigabyte lease, sorry, 10 gigabyte storage, 6-month lease. It's going to look at the inactivity, which is going to be every 30 days. So if there's no changes in the content, we can flag that up. Recertification is going to be every 30 days again. And so whoever was part of this team, we're going to make sure the owners will be able to review, will be able to check that. And we can also then say that it's going to be archived or deleted at the end of that lease. And we can then renew that lease 3 months thereafter. So we hit next. And the third step is around verifying the permissions and guest permissions that are included as part of this team. Now here I've kind of opened this up and allowed myself or the end user to be able to change these things. We can either grey these things out completely or hide them as well. So if we want to give kind of users the ability to see what they're requesting, then we can do that, or we can hide it completely. And so here in the app mentions and the fun stuff, I've said we're going to keep it moderate. We're not going to go very strict on this one, and we are going to allow stickers and memes and things like that. Now, because of the answers that I've set, we've predefined the naming convention here. So in this case, I'm going to use improve remote working. No, I'm not. I'm going to choose webinar, because that's what I called it. And we can see the naming convention that's going to be applied to this. And internal webinar. Then we hit submit. This is going to go through and it's going to then start the approval process. So I will hopefully, within the next minute or two, get an approval request. So here we go. My hub has sent me a card. And this is the beauty of Teams, because if you're working within the Teams environment, you can easily click on that and it will then come up in the chat area. I can then see that this is what we've been asking the system. And once it comes through, we'll be able to see all the other details around it. So now imagine that I'm a manager instead of the requester. I can then go in, I can see what the request summary is. If there's any notes to approvers, that would show up. We can see the status as well. So if there's hundreds of these things, it's very easy to identify. We can look at all the settings underneath that. So what was it about? What kind of membership have we got? In this case, there's a logic behind it. We can click on the policy and we're going to see what's enabled within here. We can also look at advanced settings, and all of those are captured within here. Once this is then approved, so I'm happy with that, so I'm going to approve it and submit. This will then go off and it will then go through that. I'm going to show you a very quick recertification example as well of let me just pick a specific team. And the easiest way to do that is either I can go through the confirmations or I can have a look at workspaces. This will give me a view across my tenant, so I can see if there's any specific actions pending, the names, the types, when they were created. So I'm going to go down and I'm going to see which one needs confirm governance details. So we can see, let's pick electronic events. And this is an Office 365 group. So within here, we can say, okay, there's an automatic import. So we've created this and now we want to confirm. We can then say, okay, yes, I am a primary contact. So put my name next to it. We can then define the correct policy that can be applied. In this case, I'm going to stick to the team surge one that we showed you. And I'm going to select maybe the legal department in this case. Hit submit, and that's it. So that will go off back into workspaces, and it will then continue kind of living within there until it needs to be recertified again. So what we're showing you here is making sure that the ownership is taken care of, but it doesn't become too cumbersome for whoever's looking after it. So it becomes maybe a 5 to 10 minute job to figure out who's within there, who should be part of it, and then obviously go from there. Now I'm going to pass on to Chris, where he's going to cover kind of the aspects that Combined Knowledge provide in terms of the training material. So pass it back to Chris.
Thanks, Yatindra. Right, so let me just quickly show my screen. So I bet you're thinking, you're sort of sat in your seat, at which point are we in our organization? I mean, have we started yet? Did COVID-19 push us to start using Teams, or were we using Teams before this? But now that we're working from home, we're really pushing further and further. I mean, even for ourselves at Combined Knowledge, Yatindra's presentation rings true. I mean, we're all sort of communicating on Microsoft Teams so much more than we used to when we were sort of back at the office. So I mean, we're technology experts, and with AvePoint, I mean, a lot of people are sort of already clued up on Teams, and people always say, "Oh yeah, we'll just let people try it out. Everyone will kind of learn as they go." But switching on Microsoft Teams is like asking your whole organization to just adopt a new way of working. You'll get it. Just try it out. People are not like technology. You just can't switch on a light switch and just say, there's your knowledge. You're now engaged with this product. Let's have some success. It doesn't work like that. In 9 years of working with technology go lives in organizations, it's quite often the case where we need help with that kind of adoption. So controlling the governance, it's absolutely excellent that AvePoint have these tools available to allow you to achieve that. But what about the people who are going to be using these tools? They may be sitting dreading going on to that meeting that the managers organized, will say, I'm not sure about whether I'll have my camera or my microphone. So what would we typically do for those individuals in an organization? Combined Knowledge has worked with many organizations over many years to bring success in these digital platforms to entire organizations, even if they're locally based in the UK or internationally. And we quite often have a program or like a shopping list of what we'll offer our customers. And that could include things that we call buzz days. So a buzz day is kind of like a technology fair for your business, where we talk about Teams or other Office 365 apps, and we start to build the excitement for the tools. We stand in front of people, we show them the technology, we answer questions, we just build up that enthusiasm. You can imagine, as you can see from the image on the left of the slide there, we've got a few sorts of promos that we give away, sort of things like water bottles, stickers, badges, those kind of things, just to kind of, again, build excitement and recognition of the kind of adoption brand within your organization. So Buzz Days are all about getting people excited. Something is on the horizon. What we also normally do is what we call champions training. You might have heard the word champions a lot in technology rollouts. Champions are the kind of go-between IT and the actual department. Rather than someone saying, IT, I've got a question, actually, we train people within departments who know the way their team works, know the data that they're working with. We train them on the technology so they can relate the technology to their digital ways of working. So champions training is now essential for large organizations to achieve success in these kind of rollouts. And then we also need to provide a level of end user training for your organization as well. We can't just say the champions will do it. The champions can't burden the entire demand of the organization for this technology. So we offer a sort of more reduced amount of learning for the end users because we can't take everyone out of the business for half a day. So maybe we'll schedule some online webinars where they can turn up and learn about this new technology. We found that this particular structure has a heavy impact on the success at the start of a go live. But how do you keep that momentum going? Well, making sure that you've got the same quality knowledge that's sort of fluent throughout the organization for the longevity might be provided with on-demand training. At Combined Knowledge, we create our own on-demand training guides that are integrated into Office 365. This video content is also kept up to date, so as technology changes, a few of you, I bet, have been playing around with the custom backgrounds in Microsoft Teams, had a bit of fun with that. It's very cool. I've seen it popping up in a lot of meetings. When that came about, we made sure that that was included in our Training Plus content as well. So we like to make sure that, if you see something cool and new, you can just go on the learning guides and actually just kind of brush up on that content. So for the longevity, again, the champions, they can keep up to date with the technology. The end users can keep up to date. Even IT, who are supporting our champions, can also stay up to date as well. We also want to make sure that we also have a success using this tool as well. So as part of a training rollout, at Combined Knowledge, we offer a customer success manager here at Combined Knowledge. Part of that role is to basically keep in touch with you using meetings with you, the customers, to help to keep you informed about any content updates in Training Plus and advise on any new product features that are on the horizon to help you get the most out of this tool. It is really important to us that customers are making the most of this product so we can benefit the entire organization with this tool. And the customer relationship manager will work hard to build a continuous comms campaign around Training Plus with you to make sure your staff are aware that the product is available and to help them keep their evergreen skills up to date in Office 365. Sounds, wonderful, doesn't it? But realistically, if you've switched on Teams right now to kind of combat the working from home scenario, could you do buzz days? Could you do end user and champions training? Could you do on-demand learning, customer success? This takes time. It takes kind of like an agenda to build up. So one of the points of this webinar, to coincide with the governance around content sprawl in Microsoft Teams, to complement AvePoint's tools, we wanted to also offer you the opportunity to learn how we could translate the kind of 10-day operational time to get you governed in Teams, and how that will also align to something like getting your organization up and running with the skills that they need to use these tools. Over 10 working days, Combined Knowledge can offer a program to train up to 320 champions and up to 3,000 end users. And that would be done through online training, of course, in this climate. So if you were considering, 2 weeks, we could be skilled in Teams and fully supported in 2 weeks, what would that look like? Let's talk about those champions first. So what we propose for your champions in your organization are 3-hour sessions, a little bit more in depth than what the end users would cover. And we typically have 16 people per session, and we'd run a couple of sessions per day for you. Over the 10 working days, we would manage to cover about 320 champions. What would they learn from that session? Well, we cover several topics. Getting started with Microsoft Teams. We can't assume that champions have more knowledge than end users. We all start at a baseline of knowledge. So we talk about what is Microsoft Teams and what are the benefits that it offers your organization. We give you a little bit of a tour, and then we get you collaborating and looking at the features in Microsoft Teams. And we talk a little bit about what collaboration is in a business. We then talk about working in a team. So that's where we start to look at actually going into a brand new team, and we discuss things like chat in a team, the channels, the tabs, how to make use of things like app mentions, emailing channels, just to make sure that people are fully equipped as a champion to be able to utilize a team in Microsoft Teams. Again, champions will tend to get a lot of requests around meetings. How do I set up a meeting? What are live events? So we give them that comprehensively. So we talk about chat in Teams, setting up meetings through Outlook, through Microsoft Teams, how to work with live events, how to manage options during the meeting. So things like blur background, how to manage your microphone settings, and also things like recording a meeting and any governance that operates around that. And then also we talk about managing files in Teams, so cool things like co-authoring, how to manage documents and copy and move them, how to manage your notifications, and also how to configure your teams. So just a little bit around what a champion can learn about there. And as you can see, when we talk about the end users, the 3,000 end users that we could train in 10 days, we're looking at about 1.5 hours, half the time spent with the end users. We could cover up to 100 users per session, so that's where you're getting your increased value from, and we could run 3 sessions a day. So you could organize maybe 2 in the afternoon, 1 in the morning, or 2 in the morning, 1 in the afternoon, just to basically get around the way that your team operates. You can see that we still, again, have our getting started with Teams section, because again, we don't assume prior knowledge. We talk about basic collaboration within a team, meetings and chat to make sure that they're confident using these tools, a little bit about file management, a little bit about notifications and search. It's not as comprehensive, but it's about half the content that a champion would cover, meaning that it would actually mitigate quite a lot of the queries that come from the end users up to the champion level. With that kind of agenda, we feel that a business would actually be quite comfortable with that format and would be able to sort of get the most out of Microsoft Teams. So I'm going to hand back to Yatindra in a second, but I'm going to kind of suggest to you which direction will you go in. So Microsoft Teams is an evergreen solution. You might have heard that term before. It means that the technology is continually updated, interfaces change, buttons are added, buttons go. And you'll basically need an evolving management, governance, and education to keep up with Microsoft Teams. If you are going live or are considering doing so, positive early adoption is critical for the success of a new service. They like to say strike while the iron's hot. That is true for a new service as well. So we'd like you to join the numerous success stories in Microsoft Teams and not let this Microsoft Teams platform just become another lockdown necessity until the whole thing's blown over. I'm going to jump back. I'm going to give control back over to Yatindra. There we go.
Mute. Thanks very much, Chris. And so I'm going to just pick up where I kind of left off with the demo. But I think definitely kind of reciprocate what you were saying there, where I think it's a great platform. And to make the most of it, I think we need to make sure we make the right decisions, but also making sure that it's used in the appropriate ways. So coming back to here, I created a webinar and it was called Confidential. When we go into that team itself, that just timed out for a second. So
it's a little bit like Netflix, isn't it, when it asks if you're still there? You're still watching.
Yeah, that's right. I am still here, and I think we have quite a few participants that are watching as well. Hopefully that will speed things up. But within here, it created the team, and we've also got we can see the membership within there, which is what I'm going to show you, and we can also see the back end of it. So in this case, it's come up here as webinar_confidential, and we can then start from there, either chatting or doing certain requests. When we look at the back end of that request, so the SharePoint side itself, we can get an understanding of what's within there. So this is capturing all the things that we answered, so the questions and things like that. Then it goes out and it builds these things up so that we can see who the membership is for this particular group. So these are the people that were in the original team that I picked, and it's reusing them to apply to this particular SharePoint site, which is where all the content is going to lie, and we can see the kind of policies that we're applying. So without the need of someone understanding all of these things, they can then start using them. If there's a new joiner, they can automatically pick a primary or secondary and say, look, there's someone starting next week, can you add them? So you're kind of integrating that. And when we click start a request, you can go about and provision other things around that. So either adding users, so guest user can be added, for example. We can also do things such as create different teams. As part of the team search, we've encapsulated these into 8 different workflows. And this was an example of showing you one of those. So I'm going to now go back to my slides and kind of provide my takeaways from AvePoint perspective, and then we'll kind of open up the floor for any questions after we've gone through these, as well as maybe information of some webinars that we've done recently around this topic as well. So 3 key takeaways from my side. First one is making sure that automation is there for users to do the right thing, to make sure users understand what they've got, and also they then make sure it's got the appropriate level of governance around it. The second one is around making sure there's control, and the delegated enforcement is in place to enable that. And the third one is around making sure that we've got a number of ways to help you scale that. So we can have it for different departments, different teams, and it can match different needs for the organization to get you up and running, to make sure that you have the correct tagging and things in place, but also making sure that it's visible to the right people as well. So that's the three key takeaways that I have. We do have information of a webinar that we ran with Jeff Goddard here, where they talk about a similar initiative that was run in the METC, where within 10 days we were able to build the governance policies and turn that on very, very quickly. So there's URLs here. We will be able to share the slide deck as well as a recording. I think Chris has turned on recording for this, so we can share that with yourselves. And the last one before we go into questions is around taking next steps. So if you're interested, if you want to know more, feel free to contact us by scanning the QR code here, and we can give you more details in terms of what we've shown you. And I appreciate within 45 minutes we can't tell you the full intricate details of what you get, so we can take the conversation further from there. But I'll open up for any questions that we might have. Chris, have we got questions?